at the beginning of this webinar, I would like to inform you that webinar will be recorded, and kindly ask you to write your full name and surname, because we must have evidence for all participants at our webinars. And who don't have full name and surname, please write it through this webinar. Okay, at the beginning, I would like to inform our participants about our project, and after that I will give floor to Semana Alivještica to present her project or her program toward cultural mediation and mediators, and we will see how it could be combined with social innovation. Can I share my screen? I would ask host to deserve it. Okay, thank you. Mm-hmm. Okay. This project, Training and Education in Social Innovation, is realized from consortium of few university and research center. As you can see, leader partner is University of Bologna, Alma Mater Studiorum, and another partner is Hellenic Open University from Greece, University of Venice from Italy, University of Belgrade, University of Tirana, University of Zagreb from Croatia, and last but not least, it is Institute for Social Studies from Slovenia. Also in our project participate our associated partners. These are Center for Legal Empowerment from Albania, Italian Association for the Promotion of the Culture of Cooperation, a non-profit from Italy, Development Agency of Una Sana Konton Bihać from Bosnia and Herzegovina, ADRION Association of Universities of the Adriatic Ionian area from Italy, and the Ministry of Economic Development and Technology, Slovenia. Could you see another slides? It's okay with technique? It's okay? Okay, thank you, Sylvia. I would like to present the main project objectives. As a first, it is rise competence and skill in social innovation. This assumes specific objective consists of competence and skills to be raised in the domain of social innovation in terms of more inclusive and sustainable society. The objective will be achieved through capacity building approaches with a focus on contemporary social challenges in public administration, governance, urban regeneration, social entrepreneurship, welfare, migration, education, aging, and so on so far. As a second, there is established a network of universities and research centers to define and implement a joint master program in social innovation. The partners who are who have already involved in the project will establish a thematic network aimed to defining and implementing a joint master program on social innovation. We plan to accreditate it by the university concerned to diffuse competence for social innovation in the ADRION region and with the support of UniADRION network. The project outputs that are envisioned that are envisioned by project proposals are as a first action plan for preparation of the joint master. As a first action plan, we will include both organizational and content-related aspects connected to the joint master program that assume curriculum, training methods, laboratories, schedule, and so on. And the second, the action plan consisted of administrative aspects and cooperation with business partners that will host interns. Could you see presentation? No. Host disabled participant screen sharing. Please host to deserve sharing. Okay, thanks. Their second project outputs, it's a strategy for preparation of the joint master, and it assumes integrated framework endorsed by all the partners to address the common challenges and implement the joint master program on social innovation. And last but not least, it is an innovative transnational network that assume all partners and associate partners because they are fundamental to guarantee the synergies of all expertise necessary for implementing the joint master focused on theoretical and practical aspect of social innovation within the ADRION region. Okay. Can you see? The future joint master in social innovation assume as a first joint degree. Its participants will have the chance to attend a specific university for some courses or modules, and another participating university for other courses, models, recognition of study periods abroad. It assumes also mobility of professors. It will be, and it is very important that professors will be hosted by other universities, because in this way they could know each other, and they could have wider social and human capital and know another praxis and another circumstance to do and everything else. As a third, it assumes internships. The joint master will foresee an internship at the business partners. It is a small and medium entrepreneurship and research institutions, and the elaboration of master thesis in collaboration with the business partners. It's so important because we mapped that master program on social innovation that has already exists, that don't have internship, but it's very important because practical knowledge of students in the future. Technical knowledge and hands-on experience, the joint master will cooperate strictly with business partners to offer learning by doing courses, taught laboratories and workshops. And last, study tours on site visits. These will be organized at the premises of, example, innovative companies and industrial sites, research institutions. What mean with social innovation, and when does it occur? Social innovation occurs when collective action achieves three main forms of change, alone or in combination. It's according to literature. As a first, it occurs when the satisfaction of human needs, material and immaterial, not otherwise met or considered. The empowerment of marginalized social groups, toward the enhancement of capabilities and the recreation of identity, thereby increasing their visibility, recognition, access, or voice rights. And last, changes in social power and or governance relation within the community and society at large. And it occurs in different fields like migration and social inclusion, aging, urban and rural development, social and sustainability, economy, education, green economy, and so on. It's our cycle of webinars, and objectives of these webinars are offer a training opportunity on specific topic related to social innovation, and second, like to test innovative training tools for social innovation. 6 webinars are planned, and it will start today and will end it until the end of June this year. And you can see on your right side topic of that webinars. We will start with cultural mediators as communication professional in the context of migration protection, and every week you will have a chance to hear another topic which connected with social innovation. I can say at the end that you can follow us and inform about our activities, about news at our website, and LinkedIn page. You can see a link there, and I think it's the best way to present what we are doing, to hear Saman, who is panelist on our webinar today, and after that you will have a chance to comment, to give comment, to ask some questions, and all of us will try to connect her topic with social innovation. So I would like to give floor to Saman to present a workshop that she created, and you to hear, and after that ask her everything that you think it's important. Saman, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Milica. It's an honor and a pleasure to be invited to hold this little presentation. I would just like to be able to share the screen. Let's see. If I can. Is this, I hope everybody can see this. Is it visible?
No.
Then I will try again. Yeah. Can we see it now?
Yes, we can see.
Okay, so as Milica said, that this was actually a capacity building effort, which was undertaken in last year. And the idea was, because just a little bit of an introduction, I've been working as a cultural mediator on the ground since 2015, at the peak of the European refugee crisis in Serbia and Belgrade. Later on, I was involved in developing cultural mediation programs, training programs for IOM and other organizations. And this particular training material was basically developed as a result of it's practice-based, it's empirical, and the idea behind it was to be able to move towards setting some kind of uniform standards of practice in cultural mediation. The thing is that we have a society, the context of this project is, of course, the Western Balkan mixed migration flow. And we have challenges that we face are in reception, protection, inclusion, integration of refugees and migrant communities in their host environments, and the relation between refugee migrant communities and host societies, and more broadly speaking, but of course it is very closely connected to the question of communication, is multiculturalism and coexistence. What we are looking at is societies that are very quickly undergoing changes because not just of an increase in migration, irregular or regular, but because it's the way modern trends are progressing. We are going to see societies that were previously not very multicultural becoming more multicultural, and societies that are already multicultural developing issues and problems of marginalized communities that might even be third generation migrant communities. So the importance and the value of cultural mediation in all discussion, academic literature that has reviewed it as a profession since its emergence in the, let's say, even the early 1980s. It's been following the progression, and it's been recognized as a profession or a profile of a communication service, which is extremely important and significant in following relationships, social relationships between refugee and migrant communities and their host environments. So this is the context. The training was implemented in, it was designed by me independently, but the Danish Refugee Council in Bosnia and Herzegovina kindly provided me the opportunity to hold it for them as an in-house capacity building pilot project. And it was to ensure that we have quality communication service provision in which communication needs are being met properly, and the processes that are related to protection, inclusion, integration unfold adequately. So what we, the little bit of wider role of the cultural mediator, because the thing is that cultural mediators and interpreters, there's a lot of confusion about the two terms. One of the things which is very specific here, the problems that we were looking at were, one of the things is that the cultural mediator, not just their basic role is, yeah, definitely to facilitate communication, but it's happening in a very specific context. What the context is that there are these two sides and they are in an unequal power relationship. So you have a host environment, actors in the host environment, and you have people, members from the refugee and migrant communities. And in every interaction that is taking place, you see that there is this unequal power relationship. The balance of power is not the same, and providing assistance in communication in such social interactions is something very specific. And cultural mediators, because of that, they also carry out other tasks. For example, I'll give you an example. If you have a person whom you are helping communicate with their environment and they need to visit a hospital, of course you will go with them. Of course you will help them find their way around the service that they need, and you will link them to the service, you will interpret and communicate, and you will also probably need to handle conflicts and do a little bit of advocacy for them in order for them to access services. So these are the very natural tasks that are stemming from. So cultural mediators do a lot of things on the ground. In the protection context, they are also doing information dissemination, and they are playing a role in letting protection actors understand or to convey to them the protection concerns that are being faced by everybody involved in a particular situation in which you have a refugee or migrant community and a host environment. So the problems that are are seen, why this capacity building attempt or effort was different from other capacity building or training efforts, was that we recognize the fact that cultural mediators are being utilized as organization resource. For example, if you have an organization that has specific project goals, they are going to train and provide skills to their cultural mediators in terms of terminology and what else, just in that particular field. But their actual communication skills as cultural mediators, their and communicative skills are not in the focus of most trainings. It's very marginal if a training touches it. So this training wanted to address this problem that was being faced by cultural mediators of not having their role being adequately explained to them and being equipped with the communication skills that they need. And the next problem that we had on the ground was when cultural mediators are working in the protection context, their role is very undefined, in the sense that what's frequently happening is that they might start actually working as protection caseworkers. They might start doing things that are not part of their work, for which they're not qualified, but because of circumstances and because of the non-existence of training and non-existence of standards, harmonious standards of uniform practice, you're going to merge your activities into the activities of a protection caseworker. So it is very important to clearly define where is the boundary, what is exactly, in which exact particular way the cultural mediator is going to help the protection actor. So this was one of the things that this training wanted to address, because this has been a persistence problem on the ground because of people questioning and even accusing cultural mediators of being spies and whatnot. So you have a lot of problems, and service providers not being satisfied with cultural mediators, seeing them as people who might interfere in their job. And on the other hand, you have cultural mediators who are saying, we're in situations where we know that the correct information is not reaching, because we're working in an environment with protection gaps, and we can't just stand by and look at what's going on, and we need to intervene at some point. So you have a very difficult environment in which the cultural mediators are working, and it is very important to make an effort to define the boundaries, role boundaries, because everybody gets to question the quality of the service provided by the cultural mediator, but the cultural mediators hardly ever get the chance to stand up and say, well, we provide our services in this particular criteria, because cultural mediation is not actually a registered profession, and in many countries it's not legally recognized or established as a profession. It's more on an ad hoc basis. So what happens on the ground is that because of lack of training focusing on how cultural mediators should, the kind of skills that they need, and in how that they're going to define their own role and how they are going to practice on the ground according to that, is going to create, and it does create, a host of problems. One of them, which is using refugee migrants who have not even completely integrated, who don't even know the language of the host environment, as cultural mediators. Then you have a questionable quality of service because you have people working as cultural mediators who have completely different ideas of what their job is and responsibilities are supposed to be. Or they have, they don't actually have the understanding of the migration background, and protection issues, and they work without being protection sensitive. So the main objectives, when we come to objectives of this pilot training, were to provide cultural mediators with, a clear view of their own profession, and also to define the role of the cultural mediator, because usually the role of the cultural mediator is defined in terms which are very wide, because it's an umbrella term. It means a lot of things. And cultural mediators in different countries do different kind of things apart, except other than helping with communication, they do a lot of other things depending on the needs on the ground. So there's a lot of confusion, and there is a need to define the role of the cultural mediator by looking at what they are doing in terms of communication. And it is to kind of, because this is something that is actually has been happening, and it started on a bigger scale in Italy with the first waves of migrants who needed to regularize their status, and there was a need for somebody to help communicate with public service sector and between the members of the migrant communities. So people who were interpreting at that time, because you didn't have a lot of language combinations available, previously trained interpreters or whatever, people were natural interpreters. They were just kind of without any previous experience or training. They're just helping with the communication. So they behaved naturally. They didn't behave, the visibility discourse. They were not exposed to the invisibility discourse as trained interpreters are. So they were very, very explicitly present and participated in the communication, and they did it in a very natural kind of way, just as we can imagine a natural conversation happens. You have a friend who comes over to your country, doesn't speak the language, you speak their language, and you speak also the language of your own country, and you meet another person, and you all three have a conversation. Now that's the most basic and natural interpreter mediated interaction. This is the most basic unit of interpreter mediated interaction that occurs naturally, and it occurs in the form of a natural conversation or a three-way dialogue. So in this kind of natural conversation, you will see that there is an equal participation, that there isn't very formal turn-taking, and it's more flexible and organic. So this is how the natural interpreters behaved originally. Now, obviously, it raised some issues regarding loss of information in terms of accuracy or neutrality and confidentiality. But also, on the other hand, it provided us with a very interesting phenomenon, and which is how does the natural approach to interpreting dialogue actually meet the communication needs in such social interactions much better than some other approach in which the natural and organic aspect is missing. This is why it became so successful at some point, and this is why there were a lot of people who were really admiring the active role of the cultural mediator. The problem that is to be addressed, obviously, by the training was that if you are saying that you are going to work on the footing of an explicitly visible participant, and you are going to contribute utterances, you are going to intervene in the interaction, you are going to ensure that you have the best communication, best conditions for communication to occur, then you must equip the cultural mediator with a set of communication skills. So the training presented this set of communication skills, which are different from, let's say, those to which they're similar, but not entirely those which interpreters generally practice or the way that they handle interactions. One of the first things is the use of reported speech. You know, the cultural mediator is not saying things in the first person. They are present in their own, they speak in their own voice, you know. And there is a lot of academic discussion, obviously, of this kind of use of reported speech. In practice, everybody who facilitates communication will find that they are switching in between of things. But generally speaking, cultural mediators were always using the reported speech, which establishes their presence as that third person who is very integral to establishing trust, because somebody who is in a new environment, in a very unfamiliar environment, in a very vulnerable situation, let's say, if that person finds somebody who speaks their language, who can voice their concerns, it is important and it is actually useful to preserve the personhood of this third person in the interaction, so that you can have a much better communication in terms of building trust on all sides, because this third person ideally is bilingual and bicultural, that they are able to understand the perspectives of both sides and to form a third and broader perspective. This ideally should be the job of the cultural mediator, that they're able to do this. And they also should retain subjectivity of utterances, because you can't summarize things here. We cannot work like reorganizing somebody's utterances. You have, because there is information and their emotion as well. You must convey the emotional content together with the information. And you also have to make your approach very flexible and individualized. You can't say the same thing in the same way to everybody, because one person is from another background and educational backgrounds and social backgrounds, very different ones. Then there is a lot of interpreters rely on reformulation, but cultural mediators reformulate quite a lot, because they need to make sure that conflicts are kept at a minimum. So they are going to make sure that things are not relayed in the same, the meaning is the same, but the manner might help to kind of like just mitigate the influences, the negative ones. Then there is explanation and additional information. Not all service providers at all times are going to be equally culturally competent. So many times there is a lot of human behavior involved as well. So you can have a person refusing medical treatment, and the cultural mediator should be somebody helpful. They can't always know why something is happening, obviously, but generally speaking, they should be helpful. As long as there's a cultural problem, a social issue involved in something, they should be able to point this out. And the cultural mediator obviously has to rely a lot on nonverbal behavior. They are going to be very careful about their own nonverbal behavior, but at the same time, they must be very alert to if somebody is getting distress or somebody's becoming aggressive, what's happening to the dynamics of the communication, and handling side remarks, because turn taking in conversation is in natural organic conversation, is not formalized as it is in formal procedures. So these are some of the communication skill set that was presented at the training. The other thing that was presented in the training, which was different from other trainings, was to define the role of the cultural mediator in the protection context by saying that they have a role, and it is a consultative role, it is a liaison, and it is a supportive role. Now, what do we mean by that? This is because consultation means you're helping identify, let's say you're helping a protection officer identify even a person in a vulnerable situation, and you might be able to identify them. For example, if you know enough, or if you are from a certain country or background, you can perhaps guess that a person might be from a religious minority and they might not want to talk about it, but you can slowly gain their trust and help them open up about their issues and thus facilitate identification. And this is one of the things that has been repeatedly observed on the ground, that people open up and share their problems and issues with cultural mediators a lot, because they see in them a person who is able to understand their language, but also where they're coming from. So the cultural mediator has a consultative role. They have a liaison role, which is connecting a service provider with the refugee or migrant, because they're able to give back and forth messages if somebody doesn't understand the language and they need to convey a message to their asylum lawyer, for example. They're going to naturally go to their cultural mediator and say, can you please tell my lawyer this and this and this? So they are playing a liaison role, and on the ground they're supportive. For example, this is very common that if somebody is in a process, let's say they are in assisted voluntary return process and they are at the reception center, and the cultural mediator is approached by them almost every day. They're very anxious about when they're going, and the cultural mediator will be very supportive in the sense that they will each time, you know, give them this information that was provided to them by the AVR officer and explain what's going on and reassure them. And these three elements of the role of the cultural mediator can be seen in reception conditions, in inclusion, even in integration, because even with people who are seeking asylum or staying, there are stages of their inclusion and integration in wider society, in which for some time they're depending on certain service providers, and cultural mediators are a part of that system of service providers. Another of the things was that when cultural mediators, yes, they are communication professionals, but they are in the migration protection context. What we have done is that their work ethics has been broadened and linked to the work ethics of migrant protection. It has to be that way because they are primarily dealing with refugee and migrant communities. So you must incorporate the principles of protection, primarily the do no harm principle, which means that when you are engaging in communication with communities, you are going to be very careful that your communication, your utterances, what you are saying, the information you are providing is not going to create harmful effects. So this is something which is which was also different in this training than other capacity building tools in the area, where you are clearly linking the ethical framework of, because usually they take the interpreter's normative framework and they just link it to the cultural mediator. Whereas we have to say that for the cultural mediator, accuracy, objectivity, and confidentiality mean quite different things. For example, confidentiality for the cultural mediator is something which can mean a difference between life and death for some of their beneficiaries. So it's some things are very crucially important for them. For them, accuracy is a little bit more broader concept than just saying exactly what somebody said, that you have to say it. And basically, this is not something that even interpreters do, because the concern of any communication professional is to keep the communication functional. So you need to make sure that you are conveying a message accurately, but you're not creating disruption to the overall process of communication. So we're coming to the other one of the other elements was that there usually most trainings are juxtaposing or putting cultural mediators completely opposite to interpreters, which is a very old-fashioned way of looking at things, because in interpreting studies, it is now very well established that the conduit model or the passive invisible role is actually not the actual role of the interpreter. This is what they call the interpreter's paradox. It is now academics widely accept and believe that interpreters are equal participants in coordinating meaning, in the construction of meaning, but still their ethics is defined in a sense that they're still so exposed to the invisibility discourse that they're constantly facing the interpreters, what is called the interpreter's paradox. But for the cultural mediator, this actually doesn't exist because they are communicating from an explicitly visible footing. And one of the ideas in the training was to show actually how similar the job of any communication professional is when they are placed in certain context and setting associated with cultural mediators. For example, a hospital or a center for social welfare. People are, employment sector. People are going to be behaving similarly in all these contexts when they're communicating, when they're assisting in communication, whether they're interpreters or cultural mediators. So in the training, we define that there are some tasks, regardless of the other tasks that cultural mediators might do, which are very naturally associated to the task of facilitating communication, as we said, providing information, navigation of service provision systems, advocacy and conflict management. The training worked on building a protection-sensitive approach and providing a knowledge of migration as a context of work to cultural mediators. So the 2-day training, it was 6-hour sessions for 25 staff members of the Danish Refugee Council in Bosnia and Herzegovina, including their cultural mediators and bilingual protection staff. And generally the responses were good. However, we had some, in terms of lessons learned, it was difficult to implement the training to take it, let's say, to a broader and higher level, because of, generally speaking, there doesn't seem to be that much of a social there doesn't seem to be that much of a political will, a policy will, let's say, to be interested in cultural mediation. So even though communication needs persist, the capacity building work that should be done for cultural mediators is not being done. And one of the things that keeps on happening is that people come in. Now we had people from Burundi, you need a French interpreter, you will take the French interpreter and you will just put them in the middle of this crowd of people from Burundi without a day of training in migration or protection context or of any kind of cultural mediation. So we see these things happening over and over again, where you are you're just putting people in crisis situations, in an emergency response, without consolidating knowledge, without building capacity building tools for an area which is extremely important for general social well-being. This is how I see it, because our social interactions are units of communication, and if they're not unfolding well on the ground, you can't have a healthy multicultural society in which different groups can coexist. There will always be a lot of marginalization and a lot of isolation. I think I've used up my time. I hope I've covered all the topics. So in the end, I would just like to say that in my opinion, I think that the training addresses very central aspects of the cultural mediators' work, in the sense that all cultural mediators everywhere tend to work in a very similar way, in a very natural approach. And therefore, the training design can be applicable to other country contexts as well. And it's also whether you are a so-called transit country in which you have more of reception conditions, or you are a destination country in which you have more of integration. The basic components of the cultural mediator's role in protection will be the same. They will be consultants, they will be people, liaison people, and they will be support on the ground. Thank you.
Thank you, Saman. Thank you for very interesting presentation. And now it's time which is envisioned for our panelists. And I would like to call you to ask Saman how to make connection between her workshop and capacity building and social innovation. So who will be the first? Please raise the hand. Okay, Stefano and okay. Okay, Stefano.
Okay, thank you very much. My name is Stefano Volpicelli. I'm from Italy. I'm a sociologist by chance. I'm a practitioner and slash academic, both. First of all, I want to thank Saman for the presentation, and although unfortunately I understand that the limited time allocated is leave a lot of floor for there are many things that should be further developed or deepened. According to the role that I was told is I receive some sort of questions or to answer regarding the presentation, and especially in how the role of cultural mediators is promoting this social innovation in terms of the three points that Milica highlighted at the beginning. How much it improve the satisfaction of human needs that are not met. How much it empowers the marginalized groups that Saman clearly and correctly said we are in an asymmetric relationship. So how to put this relationship to power play, let's say, more balanced. And the last is the change in social power governance relations. Well, I am a very old and grumpy practitioner, so I remember my first experience in cultural mediation dates back from 1998, so you can only understand how old I am. And I learned a lot from this experience. I don't want to bother you with this experience, and neither to comment or criticize what has been shared by Saman. I would like just to quickly raise one point that to me in the last 30 years remained unsolved, basically. Because a part of the role of cultural mediators that is important indeed, but there is something wrong, because when we think about cultural mediators, we think about people or professionals, whatever they perceive their role is, that are dealing with the vulnerable ones, in order to help the vulnerable ones get listen to the others that are on the other side of the balance, meaning the powerful one. Because whenever we are dealing with service providers, for instance, Saman mentioned hospitals or employing deploying the services, etc. There is always something that these persons they don't want to to understand. Basically, I mean, they have their tasks, and their task they have to fulfill their tasks, and so they don't do any effort. And for this reason, we have cultural mediators. So, well, to me, in my experience, the most important role of the cultural mediators is not what do they do with the vulnerable one, but what do they do with the other one? Meaning, the social innovation comes when we are able to change a social practice and especially the culture of the service. Meaning that it is very useful when we convince the other side, the powerful side, we teach them that the change in their posture, the change in their abilities, empathic, let's say, capacities, it will work. But this is very difficult because usually, for instance, staying in the metaphor of the hospital, the example of the hospitals, I mean, when you go to practitioners are overwhelmed, you know. You present your company, the poor one, and you try desperately to explain, and but they are very, I mean, they are limited in time, and their skills are always the same. I mean, they are treating one person like the others. I mean, one from India is the same from Denmark. I mean, for them, because they rotate around the pathology. And they can't say all the other things that are, someone mentioned these aspects that are etheric, let's say, immaterial. That is the culture. What does it mean, the cure? What does it mean, the meaning of the medicine, the role of the medicine, the role of the treatment, okay? This is what I learned exactly in that very first, that was about the clinical for migrants, women that were pregnant. And we learned a lot about that because the culture was different. There were different people coming from countries where they appreciated very much a prompt response from the doctor. There were other women that they despise this decisionism, you know, and despise the therapies because they were more involved in the, let's say, human component of the relationship, like in a sort of our old medicine in the 19th century, where the placebo effect was very powerful and it was the most important tool in the hands of the doctors. So we need to change them, not just to help to voice out, to help the vulnerable in voicing out. In this sense, we can have a social innovation when our services are able to listen, are able to take in account a different perspective, are able and skilled in treating persons and not patients. But as we know, this is a battle from very old time. I mean, doctors, they don't want to be involved. They want to see a person in front. They want to see a pathology. I'm sorry if I'm very reductive, but this is still an ongoing discussion everywhere, unfortunately. So they need to understand that they earn something, the practitioners, I mean. And to do that, we need to be very, very skilled in let them understand that they are gaining something because they are improving their skills as practitioners. And with that new skills, they can easily meet and be more effective in their in the compliance, especially of the patients. But this is not enough, unfortunately, because whenever you go, you can easily find doctors that are very, very kind, very curious, and this depends on their personality and the character. It's not related to the disciplines they were trained to. So we need to involve the management. When the management is involved, it trickles down, you know, because the management that is changing the procedures, they are changing their, for instance, organizing and involving exactly cultural mediator to do to train the doctors, the nurses. That is the social innovation. This is the real challenge. Otherwise, we will never change anything. We will help someone to speak out more or less correctly, or as someone said at the beginning, we advocate for their rights to receive treatments as best as possible, but we will never change, we will never reach any social innovation. This is very, very important. And this is in the term of the role, since we were talking about the role of cultural mediator and the overlapping with interpreters, because sometimes it seems the same, you know. But this is not the fault of the person or the training program. It's the fault of the cultural mediator that doesn't understand, or because he or she has no power to reach out exactly or to bargain with the practitioner and the management this change. So I would say that maybe I would include this part in the training, how to mediate with those in power in order to achieve some sort of change in their culture and in their practices. The second thing, and then I conclude, is about migration, you know, because, okay, that the first part can be applied to every field, okay? I did cultural mediator in 1994, imagine, with drug users, okay? I was doing cultural mediator with the service for drug users, because the psychologists simply, they had the predetermined solutions, and it was my role to say, listen, whatever you're saying with this one, with the background, with the setting, the living setting, etc., can't work. Okay, so and I was teaching them about the reality that these people were experiencing, because at the time I was a street worker. And this was very useful because they changed before saying or giving therapies, etc. They were asking and they were knowing better the background in order to understand if that could be useful or not. Okay. But when we go in the field of migration, I mean, what are we doing? This is very unfortunate, you know, because there are limited services, there are limited possibilities, and these people are completely naked in front of the authorities. But this implies one thing, that not always our client, the vulnerable migrant, let's say, that is in need of something, as Milica said, needs to be satisfied. They play a role because they learn that they have to play a role. They are not showing up their real identities in the sense, not the anagraphical, I mean, but not only that, but also their true identity. They are trying to comply as much as possible because they understood that this is the way to obtain something. In this, there is the risk for the cultural mediator to bring up some issues, some topics that are not relevant at all. or at least that are not the true one, that are not the real thing that are needed by the client, our client. So maybe in this, I don't know, because exactly I think that maybe there is in this in the training program that someone presented, but it was very fast. So and this is very important, because a cultural mediator should understand, even when, I mean, to reformulate, you said, Saman, to reformulate the needs before to reformulate the needs in the way that the other one understands. And this is a crucial point, okay? And, but sometimes, and Saman mentioned this, sometimes, or at least in this experience was very funny, the cultural mediator is best if it is not part of the same ethnic group, because the clients most of the time feel uncomfortable, okay, to reveal some aspects to someone that belongs to the same community. This with the African clients is absolutely relevant. They don't want that these people, because maybe you never know that these people know someone that is part of the same tribe or the same village or the same community, so they want to disclose anything. And this is another challenge, you know, because it is paradoxically, it's even better when someone maybe speaks the language, but it doesn't belong to the same community. Okay, so there are, to resume, two big issues. The one is to change. We need to change those who must change, that are not our clients, are those who are providing services, are those who are drafting laws for the reception, those who are organizing the reception. I'm speaking from Trieste, as probably some people can know that Trieste hosts one of the best experience in reception, because I work in it. We have the spread reception. We don't have centers. We are just renting apartments, and small, very small, in the city center, where people can mingle with the autochthones. And this is the best way to do cultural mediators, you know, because the social innovation, unfortunately, cannot be done top down. I mean, it's bottom up always, you know. So we need to start to create this critical mass of people that are following, and critical mass of practitioners that are understanding, critical mass of people, of practitioners that must understand that they live in a globalized world. And it will be more and more and more the case when they will have to deal with different people. So basically, it is a culture of meeting the difference, okay, more than providing the service. I would say that that's it.
Okay, thank you, Stefano. I agree with you that all of us could be a cultural mediator, but I don't know how it is possible, if it is possible, and when it is possible. But if it is possible, it could be not social innovation, it be innovation in all society, or whole civilization. I don't know how to say, but Saman, what do you have to say to Stefano comments?
Yeah, okay. I mean, I of course, I understand. I mean, one of the things is obviously because of the limitations in time, I just presented the key points because I needed to point out the differences in this capacity building tool that we designed from what is generally implemented. So I had to focus on key points. The aspects you were talking about are present in the rest of the training, because this is a very common perception of not just the cultural mediators who are working on the ground of their own role, like they're the helpers, they're the saviors, they're the champions of the underdog. This is one of the major problems that we find actually on the ground, that this is the perception of the cultural mediator. It's also the perception, it becomes the perception of other service providers who will think that, okay, these guys are fighting for the migrants. I personally think that that is a very harmful perception, and it actually got formed only because cultural mediators were used in situations of protection gaps where they were carrying out activities that should be associated and are associated with the profiles of protection caseworkers or social workers. And they took on these roles and they started intervening in other, as if they belong to these other professions. Sometimes this happened because simply there's nobody else. And I have experienced these things firsthand, that I am left with a very problematic situation with no protection officer in sight, and I'm supposed to have an answer. But and I think that this is exactly why it's important to understand that cultural mediators are primarily communication professionals, and it's entirely not useful or productive for them to think of themselves as people who are there to secure access to rights and services. That is the job of protection actors. Cultural mediators can, let's take advocacy as an example, patient advocacy. If the advocacy is of the type where you go to the hospital and the person says, okay, this migrant cannot receive emergency care because they don't have an identification document, and you say, well, this is their right because this is urgent medical care, and they get it. But if you have the advocacy, which involves coordinating steps with different institutions, for example, the institution of social care, plus mental health, plus physical health for a person who might be suffering from psychiatric disorder and is being thrown out of an actual hospital because of that, and the social center for social care is not involved or not present, and the cultural mediator is at that point trying to make sure that the patient whose life is being threatened stays in the hospital, but also trying to make help out the doctors with finding ways of seeing how that they can handle the pressure. So what I'm saying is that cultural mediators need to perceive their own role, and others need to perceive their role as far more neutral, because these are few effects, and one of the part of the trainings exactly addresses this question. There are a few things that happen to people when you're facilitating communication in an unequal power relationship. You're either aligning with the stronger side, or you are becoming the champion of the underdog, and both are kind of natural reactions. And you can also start making decisions for people. You might start thinking, oh, this person in a vulnerable situation, why they don't leave their husband because he's beating them, and try to gear the communication in a direction in which that person is. And these are exactly the kind of things which happen to cultural mediators because they are put on the ground without a single day of training by most organizations. And not that they don't receive it at the beginning. The trainings that they actually do receive are focused on other skills. You will in detail learn about how the Center for Health Services work, how the asylum law services work, how all the other services work, but what are you to do as a communication professional? How are you going to be objective as well as empathic? How are you going to understand the problems faced by a worker from the host environment at the reception center, understand their position, as well as the position of a migrant? This is what the training was focusing on. that third perspective is very necessary in order for cultural mediators to be communication professionals and be constructive in the interactions that take place. Because if the interactions go on taking place in which there's a lot of othering going on, you haven't achieved anything. And the other question that you've raised, I agree with you. I think that ideally, what I would like to see is independent agencies providing the service of cultural mediation without other project goals, with very strict outlines and guidelines of how people are going to behave, how is that service going to be provided, in which way it is going to be provided, what is the work ethics of that person, and that there is also a mechanism for consolidating the enormous amount of field information that is generated through the contacts of cultural mediators with the migrant communities, which can be of various uses, not just in various spheres, in the security sphere, in crime fighting, in the social sphere, just to the participatory voice in order to have an overall view of a social situation. But we are very far from that, of course. So I really believe that in order to have better interactions, every time you meet a person, every time you have a contact with a person, we can see this in our personal lives. If we have a good interaction with them, we are going to have a better day. We are going to have a better life that day. So just our communication, our daily interactions with people are extremely important. And if we focus on making sure that the person facilitating this interaction is doing it in a correct way, doing it professionally, doing it according to certain standards, that there is the negative effects are mitigated as much as possible, the positive aspects are highlighted as much as possible, then we can hope, at least for having on a daily average basis, better interactions in our society. I mean, that's how I look at it.
Thank you, Saman. Do you have some questions? Another panelist?
Milice, da li se čujemo? Okay.
Čujemo se.
Okay, I'll switch to English, definitely. Okay.
Yes, I can hear you, and you can ask some questions to Saman.
Okay.
Jovane.
Okay, hello everybody. My name is Jovan Filipovic. I'm a quality management professor and the head of the quality management department at the School of Organizational Sciences at the University of Belgrade. After this very informative presentation and Stefano's comments, I would have a question of general nature. As a quality management professor, I'm always interested in infrastructure. I'm always interested in enabling conditions. Saying this, I would like Saman to comment on the role of government in support for social innovation projects. And also I would have a quick comment. We definitely don't want to see our governments as command and control actors. We want them to provide us with enabling conditions and to be some sort of catalyzer. Okay, so just your comment, and maybe somebody else comment on this. We definitely need government in this.
Thank you, Jovan. Saman?
Yeah, I'm afraid that the efforts at involving state bodies in, generally speaking, in the area of language provision, not just limited to cultural mediation or the migration sector. It is very limited. For example, there hasn't, at least in Serbia, there hasn't been an exam for court certified interpreters for a very long time. For years now, the exam has not been held, and the number of court certified interpreters for many languages is extremely limited still. So there isn't any serious initiative coming from that side. The initiative that is coming, that we are seeing, is actually from the NGOs or the international agencies that are working in the field. There is a number of initiatives in this respect. I've had some cooperation with the Serbian Association of Court Certified Interpreters and Translators, who are interested in trying to find a model of training and capacity building, which would mean a little bit more freedom for the court certified interpreter, let's say a loosening of the invisibility and ethics normative framework to adjust to actual needs of communication. So there is some steps that are happening now, that are being taken now, but unfortunately, I think that the question of communication has been largely neglected, and it has been done in a way in which we see a kind of refusal to believe that our society is changing, that we see more and more people working who are actually regular migrants that are coming to Serbia to work and doing different jobs, and that whether we want or not want, that this society is changing and becoming more multicultural, and that communication needs are going to be there, and that we unfortunately don't actually have a proper system in place. We just have NGOs, and each NGO has their own standards, and it depends on their will if they're going to provide a service or not.
Thanks, Aman. I don't see any raised hands. Do you have some questions? Okay. Miodrag, the floor is yours, and after him, Boris Herman. Miodrag, you can ask, you can put some question to Saman.
Thank you. Thank you for the introduction of the project, and thanks, Saman, for the very fruitful presentation. My name is Miodrag Sresta. I'm coming from the, actually on behalf of the Coalition for Solidarity Economy Development in Serbia, the association of 4 NGOs that are trying to work on enabling environment for social entrepreneurship in Serbia. And that's the background for the social innovation, or for our participation in this, let's say, project. And but my background personally, I started working with Group 484 20 years ago, and they're still a relevant organization in migration. We started working, of course, with the refugees and internally displaced person and asylum seekers afterwards, and now with the mixed migration flows as well. And basically, I wanted to say that cultural mediators are, I think, a good example of how social innovation came across in the migration support system when we have a different context. But as Stefano said, and pinpoint that basically this approach is something that we have for a long time, and as you, Saman, said, this is empowering and invoicing those that are vulnerable and lack of power or an imbalanced power in the society, no matter if they're refugees, internally displaced persons, asylum seekers, or Roma, people with disability, or young people in rural areas, uneducated, or so basically all those that are socially vulnerable categories sometimes need those mediators, whether we can call them cultural. It's pretty clear why we call them cultural mediators here, because there are different cultures and ethnicities coming in these mixed migration flows. So basically, but we did have cultural or mediators or protection officers or outreach officers or communication officers when we work with the refugees and internally displaced persons, because that's what you need. You need somebody from this community. Often I can agree to a certain degree what Stefano said, that sometimes people do not open to the members of their own community, but also I know the opposite examples, actually, that people that are really, your neighbor or have the same origin as yourself are pretty much easier to open up than to somebody who is seen as who can see you as a newcomer or somebody who is an alien. So basically, I think that this is a good topic for the first webinar and for the illustration of how the social innovation works in the migration context and in the example of the cultural mediators. And my question, or maybe a question to all, but if someone has a privilege to maybe answer that, is maybe a question on how the social innovation actually can use this model of having mediators and those empowering of vulnerable ones, and still we can see today in the world that the imbalance and inequality is even higher than it was in the previous century. So how is this possible? How is it possible to have more, again, back to the question, have more mediators, and how can the science or academic, but also practitioners, which I'm more coming from, what can we do actually to really promote and make these innovations plausible in a much larger sense, and is it possible for me? This is the first time that I have heard about the master course on social innovation. Is this subject? Is this something that actually we can say that could bring some more leverage in the society, some more equality, some more support to those that are the most vulnerable and at the margin of our society? So maybe also to those that are organizers and the leaders in the project, what are your aspirations and what do you try to achieve to set up a master and course and summer course, but to create or to contribute to young researchers and academics to deal with this idea and with this notion of social innovation, so that we can have it more in practice and more like let's give an example of cultural mediators all around the world in different fields like migration, but also social entrepreneurship or organic farming or sustainable development and any others where we can actually in the long run have a more or better distribution in the society and less inequality. It's more of a comment, but maybe someone and somebody else would pick on some of this. Thank you.
Thank you, Miodrag, for your support and because you cooperate with us. I hope that you will include when we accreditate this joint master. And I hope it will be good cooperation and that students in the future will have chance to cooperate with you and your colleagues from your organization. And also thank you for your questions. Saman, do you have answer?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I just wanted to say that both things are true as far as opening up to cultural mediators is concerned. Stefano correctly pointed out that there are certain cases and certain situations in which a person will be afraid of being judged by somebody from their own country. And in that case, it's helpful to have somebody from the host environment who speaks the language and is a bilingual and bicultural specialist. In the curriculum that I developed previously for International Organization for Migration, which is currently being revised, I did identify 3 basic types of cultural mediators and some pros and cons of And what you said is also true, because from my personal experience, if I enter a reception center with over 1,000 migrants, every day I will hear 30 stories from 30 people who want to come and they want to talk and they want to do it just because somebody speaks the language there from their country and they want to share their experience. They don't even need something. So both things are true, just to get that away. For me, I think that the social innovation aspect of cultural mediation would be now, when we are looking at basically what we can see is a decline of what was once called a boom job. And I'm afraid that it's being even in academic discussions, there is an insistence that, oh, well, cultural mediators are actually just they're just bad interpreters. I mean, some people actually even come to that conclusion, that they're basically just bad interpreters. And they're not very willing to accept the fact that there is actually something in terms of communication that cultural mediators are doing, which is different from what we consider to be interpreters. And I think that this is actually a negative approach, because all practitioners, and I was very lucky to have the opportunity twice to attend conferences arranged by the Serbian Permanent Association of Serbian Court Certified Interpreters, and exchange a lot of ideas with court certified interpreters who feel very restricted in their role by the invisibility discourse. So in the minds of the academics, the interpreter is already a fully visible third and active participant, and there is no need to have a cultural mediator because interpreters are already doing the job. And so there is in academic sense, it's kind of like we're looking at a trend in which there is a lot of need and scope for serious work by academics into investigating the natural approach of the cultural mediator. I'm a practitioner. I'm not a person. I did my English Lit, but I'm not a person who has a background of interpreting studies. And I can talk about the profession as a practitioner with experience based on actual work in a range of different situations with a lot of different people. So it's what in my mind, social innovation would be at this point presented by a shift in actually the perception of the interpreter's role, and in finding common ground between the natural approach taken by the cultural mediator and the skills of the trained interpreter, and to find a model or a model of work in which you have people who are able to respond to specialized situations. It's not the same thing to help with communication in the courtroom and the hospital. Everybody who has interpreted knows that this is a fact.